Welcome everyone to Monday Match Analysis. I'm Gill Gross. Carlos Alcaraz is Doha champion. He beats Arthur Fils, obliterates him in one of the more impressive displays you will see. First half of this week's show is going to be getting into that. Alcaraz, Doha. Second half of the show, this is more of a hybrid episode. It's going to be mailbag style. I'm getting to your comments, and that'll give us a chance to cover things like Mensik beating Sinner, Joao Fonseca, some of the larger storylines right now on tour. So it is a loaded episode here of Monday Match Analysis. But as for Dallas and Rio, I'll try to maybe come out with some shorter little breakdowns, maybe some episodes of The Point to cover those finals. Just because of scheduling, I had to get a move on this Sunday morning, and that made it impossible for me to cover both Del Rey and Rio. Right back to commentary on TC come Monday. So let's start with Carlos. Before I go into the performance in the final, I do want to just shout out the fact that this was a clear letdown spot, a hangover spot, if you will. There are huge appearance fees on offer for players like Jannik Sinner and Carlos Alcaraz to play this particular event in Doha. They are very much incentivized to turn up at the event in that respect. However, you've just won the Australian Open. It's the middle of February. I would have understood had Carlos Alcaraz only been able to muster 70, 80% at this event. If he was only at 3/4 speed, that would have been understandable. But if he were only at 3/4 speed, he probably gets picked off by Karen Khachanov or Andrei Rublev, who both played great against Carlitos this week. Probably doesn't win the event. He needed to show a very high level of focus and intensity and ultimately motivation in order to win this week in Qatar. And that's not lost on me. I don't think that should be brushed aside. That aspect of this was pretty impressive to me. It deserves a shout out. As far as the final is concerned, well, it was 6-2, 6-1. It was flawless from Alcaraz. Fils played some part as well. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. But certainly it's not worth delving into the nuances and the details of Carlos did this tactically, and then he found an advantage there. And, it's not one of those matches where that is necessary because it was just so comprehensive, and the superiority on court in so many different areas was absolutely just overwhelming that it becomes pretty simple. But what I do think is worth doing is asking, where has Alcaraz gotten better? What has enabled him to go on this incredible run on outdoor hard court? Because after he lost to David Goffin in the second round of Miami a little less than a year ago, nobody would have predicted that he'd win his next 30 matches in these conditions, that he'd become US Open champion and Australian Open champion. I'm not going to act like it would have been the most absurd proclamation, but he's 30-0 since that loss to David Goffin. So clearly something has happened here. He's 30-0. The ability to win points from behind is the standout feature right now. It is borderline absurd how regularly Carlos Alcaraz is able to win points right now from disadvantageous positions. And he set the tone in the first game of this match at love all 30-40 break point before it was clear that this match was going to become a blowout. Arthur Fils steps into a backhand down the line and hits it well. And Alcaraz covers the space, gets there in time, strong base lower body, running forehand, cross court, short angle into open court. That's what happens after a player hits a backhand down the line. There's space on the deuce side to be exploited. And Alcaraz exploits that with a short cross-court angle that Fils can only flail at. And that is the break to start the match. You would have no idea, and this is what was going through my head while watching this match. You would have no idea that Fils is the biggest hitter in the world. Look at the data. He is. He's the heaviest hitter in the world. Alcaraz was absorbing it without a problem. In the second set, Fils averaged 87 miles per hour on his forehand. Let me put that number in perspective. Fils leads the tour in average forehand speed at 84 miles per hour. He's sitting 3 miles per hour above his average, which is already the best average. You know how many winners he hit in the second set on the forehand? One winner, 87 miles per hour. I'm not quite sure how those things go together, but it's a combination of world-class speed, but also world-class ability from defensive positions. There's just an indestructible nature right now to Alcaraz's defense. That's the point that I am making. And he has always been extremely difficult to get the ball through because he's always been world-class fast. But if you attacked him well, you could get him to miss, especially going into the forehand wing. If you attacked him with quality, you could get him to miss balls. And right now, he just doesn't seem to miss anymore from defensive positions. This was the focus for him after losing to Sinner in the Wimbledon final. So often we talk about losses being the turning point for great players where they go into the lab and they figure something out. And after losing to Sinner in the Wimbledon final, I am convinced, and I haven't gotten full confirmation, but all signs point in this direction. I am convinced that he literally just focused on fortifying his running forehand and his forehand pace absorption, and it's great on the backhand side as well. I don't want to neglect that, but fortifying that. And I don't think there's been a more important improvement for Carlos Alcaraz in the last year, maybe ever. I don't think there has. And I tweeted that out, and some people are countering with the serve, and I'll push back against that. I don't think his serve improvement has been nearly as significant as his improvement in defending his forehand corner. Just if we dig into serve shot quality, and don't get me wrong, I think Carlos has improved the shot, and I love the technical changes that he's made. But in 2024, his serve quality rating, which is a rating that to me gets in the ballpark and isolates the serve most importantly. Because you can look at other numbers, they don't isolate the serve. At least serve quality just looks at the serve. In 2024, it was 58th. In 2025, it was 60th. And in Doha, the quality number was 7.9, which is still exactly his average from the previous year. In 2023, it was 54th. So at least by that metric, which is how often you're making it, where in the service box are you putting it, how fast is it, how much swing does it have, how effective is it in producing successful results. That number just takes all of those things and puts it into one. You don't need to take it as gospel, but again, I think it's a ballpark. Alcaraz has been pretty much flatline in that number, which is a little bit surprising to me, but I don't know. It certainly supports the argument I'm trying to make right now. The running forehand and in general the defense has gotten so much better. And he had opponents this week. I mentioned that Khachanov and Rublev played well. He had opponents this week doing the thing that used to be not something that Alcaraz consistently had trouble with, but it used to be when he lost, this is usually how it went, which is guys were suffocating him with just relentless redlining offense, and Khachanov and Rublev tried to do that. And Khachanov, I was shocked at how well he was doing it because it's usually not his game. But Alcaraz just looked comfortable. He never looked uncomfortable despite the fact that he was under assault constantly by players who were really trying to just ramp up their aggression levels. He's taken what has always been world-class speed, and to me, he's just married it with the highest possible level of technical defensive capabilities. Now, the main reason he destroyed Fils in this match, emphasis on the word main, because you could give me a laundry list of reasons that I'd probably agree with. He didn't make any mistakes. He made almost every ball. You can go ooh la la at the highlights, and you certainly can, because the highlight reel is great. I would argue that the highlight reel is usually to always great with Carlos Alcaraz, that you can always ooh la la at Carlos's best moments in a match. But you know what number I love that I think really paints the picture of how good he was? He made 87% of his forehands and 90% of his backhands. Those are total numbers, 87%, 90%. That's how consistent he was off the ground. Relentless consistency was what made this performance an 11 out of 10. I also want to shout out the backhand down the line. Alcaraz has always hit his backhand hard, but it's gotten way more precise to my eyes. And he's leveraged that improved precision with an increased appetite to take the backhand line. He's not overplaying the pace on it, but he's putting it on a dime, and that's a shot. That's about using time and using accuracy and finding open court, which is so often available based on players kind of utilizing a positional bias to try to make more forehands. And Alcaraz has just become a killer at exploiting that with his backhand line. That's been a standout throughout 2026 that I feel like is a pretty noticeable shift from last year. Not that the backhand down the line wasn't a part of the Carlos Alcaraz equation. It certainly was. I just haven't seen him hit it so well and so frequently as I have Australian Open and here in Doha. Tactics, only one really stood out. I want to point out that Fils hit 12 second serves in the match. Only 12. He actually made 72% of his first serves. Didn't really think he was hitting his spots all that well, but he was making his first serves. Makes the 6-2, 6-1 part all that much more impressive. But I digress. He hit 12 second serves. Alcaraz made 11 returns back in play. Of the 11, all 11 found Fis's backhand. And then Carlos went on to win 7 of those 11 points. So that takes, first of all, that's a choice. That's Carlos saying, I'm going to be able to jam the return into Fis's backhand. That's going to be his first shot of a rally on a second serve point, and that'll put me in position to kind of go to work in the rally versus allowing him to open up with the forehand. So it's a sound tactic, of course. The execution is just not that easy. These guys are still hitting heavy 100-mile-per-hour kick serves. If you're Arthur Fils, he's got a pretty good one. And to just be able to land 11 out of 12, find the backhand, again, 11 out of the 12 times, that's pretty hard to do. That takes some skill. Now, I will say, moving on to Fils specifically, and then first I want to talk about Fils in the final, and then I want to do some bigger picture stuff with Fils. And then we will go to the mailbag. It's always a relationship. Like, tennis is a relationship. Other than the serve, which is a little bit more individualistic, yes, there are certain psychological and tactical dynamics that are affected by your opponent, but the serve is kind of a solo act. After that, the solo act is over. So I don't like the absolutes that are sometimes, plastered onto these narratives after tennis matches, like there was nothing Fils could have done, it was only Alcaraz. Or on the contrary, sometimes a player has a bad performance and it's like they were just terrible, they would have lost to anybody. I'm almost never on board with that. I mean, sometimes, but I'm almost never on board with that. Tennis is a conversation. That's what it is. Conversations don't happen with one person. So I will point out the areas in which I thought Fils gave Carlos a little help. First thing I want to look at is rally depth. I was watching these points play out, these exchanges, and I kept getting the feeling that Fils just wasn't finding any length. And then I went into the analytics, and it confirmed that for me. Fils dropped 36% of his ground strokes inside the service box. Tour average is 27%. In the deep zone, or I think could be more appropriately named the safe zone, if you put the ball really deep in the court, within 5 feet of the baseline, you're probably not going to get hurt. Sometimes you will against a guy like Alcaraz, but it goes a long way. Fils only put 20% of balls in the deep zone. Tour average is 32%. Let's compare it. Let's compare it to Alcaraz's rally depth. So here's Fis's ground stroke spread. And then here is Alcaraz's for those watching on YouTube. So Alcaraz only dropped 19% of balls inside the service box. I think that includes a couple of drop shots, though. In the deep zone, he put 35%, as opposed to Fils, who only put 20% of his ground strokes in the deep part of the court. That's a big deal. Cheap errors. Thought the most disappointing part of the final for Fils was just the start of the second set. Forehand unforced. Forehand unforced. Both balls just way long. And now it's a quick love 30. You know, you've just lost the first set 6-2. And now it's like, it's reset time. It's lock-in time. You just got blown out in the first set. Now it's high intensity here. You know that the start of the second set is then going to set the tone, potentially set a new tone, or it's going to be a continuation. And it was just loose error, love 30. Carlos was unreal at love 30 with a crazy running forehand that Fils could do nothing about. Now it's love 40. Alcaraz breaks to start the second, and basically he was unable to stop the bleeding there. The numbers were pretty bad on Fis's forehand. He only made 73% of forehands for the match. That's where he sat in both sets. Not great. That said, if we go big picture with Fils, it's only his third tournament back after missing the better part of 8 months. To make a final this quick, good signs. Beat Lehechka 3-3, beat Mensik, straight sets. The week that Fils had, despite the loss in the final, he would sign for it easily, without hesitation. The final puts somewhat of a dampener on that. He is, I think, getting into shaky territory with the Alcaraz head-to-head. If you look at the last 4 sets they've played, it's 6-2, 6-4, 6-2, 6-1. That's not great, although I don't think it's a big problem yet. I think next time he plays Carlos, though, it might be important for him to at least be competitive. I think he can brush it aside and be proud of himself for the week that he had. Big, larger picture. I see Fils taking his development very seriously, which is a great sign because we know that there's a natural explosiveness that can't be taught, that Fils possesses, that's very, very special. But the technical change that he made on the forehand, which I talked about on the mailbag last week, that shows hunger. The Ivanisevic hire, that shows hunger and desire. That's a serious player in the coaching realm. I'm sure not particularly cheap. I'm a guy who he knows is going to be pretty tough on him, I think. That's the track record that Ivanisevic at least has. Ivan Chinkas is his other coach, also a very good coach. So I really like the position that Fils is putting himself in, and I can't wait to see him continue to develop in 2026. And that's just about all I got. Alcaraz, one thing I didn't mention was the percentage serving. By the way, 74% first serves made for the week, above 80 against Fils in this final. Incredible at the net. 6 for 6. I think at least 3 really difficult volleys. There's money at the net all week long. So just to put the cherry on top of this analysis, because as I said, you can go down the list and pretty much everything is going to yield the same result. Carlos was really, really great. We'll get to the mailbag right after this. This episode is brought to you by Novig. Some of you may know I have an indefinite moratorium on sports betting advertisements. So when I saw Novig pop into my inbox, I was preparing to give them the same answer that I've given other sports books recently, which is thanks, but no thanks. Then I read a little bit more and I decided to make an exception. Novig is not a traditional sports book. They are actively challenging that model and making it more favorable for the players. With a traditional sports book, the house sets the line and they take a cut for themselves. That's the VIG. Whereas Novig, you are competing against other players, not the house. There's no built-in VIG working against you, so when you're right, you keep more of your edge. Novig operates as a sweepstakes. It is available in most U.S. states. No purchase is necessary. Must be 21 or older. Players can participate for free using Novig coins or using Novig cash to compete for rewards and cash prizes. Plus, when you use my code, GILL, that's GILL, you get free $5 in Novig coins just for signing up, plus a 100% purchase match up to $25 when using my link or my code. And with that, we've reached the mailbag portion of the program. Looking forward to getting into some of these comments. Let's begin with KO Slice. At this point in Coco Gauff's career, she's managed to win 2 slams despite massive serve issues. She's worked with different coaches on her serve, but the double faulting remains consistent in her game. Do you think Coco Gauff's serve issues may just be a flaw that she'll have to just carry on with? Throughout tennis history, there's been numerous top-tier players who managed to achieve long-term success despite a glaring weakness in their game. Maybe this is the same situation for Coco Gauff. Well, it's certainly impressive how much success she's been able to have despite giving away 1 in 10 service points, which is what she does. Her double fault rate is around 10% in the last 52 weeks, which is the worst by some margin on the WTA Tour. Jelena Ostapenko is second worst, checking in under 8%, high 7s. So Coco's mental strength and her overall ability as a tennis player is on display, that she's able to maintain her stature in the sport despite this. But I don't think it's something that she should just accept defeat on. And I think the whole situation is a little bit puzzling. I will point out that in the 2023 season, Coco Gauff went a full year of tennis. She played how many matches did she play? She played 67 matches in 2023. And her double fault rate was a perfectly acceptable 5.1%. So it's in her. She is capable. And even more proof that she is capable would be that her technique is not so unnatural looking. There are some players who come up and you can see that the serve is just a hurdle for them. It's foreign. It does not come naturally. It's not in their physiological DNA to serve a ball overhand. That's not Coco, right? I mean, Coco doesn't look like Sara Errani. She doesn't look like Jelena Ostapenko. She doesn't have the physical limitations of Dasha Kasatkina. She's not Ana Ivanovic with the worst ball toss in history. She's none of these things. Sure, there are some flaws in her technique that are on more of the subtle side, that where sometimes she collapses, the toss arm might drop early, the chin might drop early, the hips might open up a little bit early for a kick serve. That's something that I think Gavin McMillan has been focusing on with her. But overall, her natural explosiveness, live arm, athleticism, technique, none of these ingredients should equate to a serve that gives her as much trouble as it has. So in that sense, it's a little bit puzzling. And I just can't, with all those things in mind, I do not expect Coco to go her entire career and to always have an issue with her second serve. I just can't see that. Next one is from member Sunny Files. Thank you for being a member. You can hit that join button and contribute $2 per month to the channel. And it goes a really, really long way for more people to become a member. Very much appreciated. What is Taylor Fritz's devotion to playing while he's injured? He's been playing a lot, 500, 250s, while clearly not being good physically. This time last year, it was a similar situation, although he did take a bit of time off. For a player of his level, why is it that he puts his recovery at risk for these tournaments that aren't important? Seems like to me, he should really be focusing on 1000s and slams. He might not win them, but deep runs are important. Look, I don't have an answer, because I tweeted this after the Australian Open. I said, I wanted to go on the record and say, before he makes his decision, I don't think Taylor Fritz should hit a single tennis ball in competitive match play in at least the first 3 weeks of February. You want to play Acapulco so that you're not coming into Indian Wells cold on match play? Perfectly understandable. But Dallas, Del Rey, from an outsider's standpoint, the fact that Taylor's dealing with knee tendonitis, that he's dealing with in Australia, something in the abdominal region, with all the tennis he's played in the last few years, and he has this reputation of somebody who just plays through injuries constantly. Why at this point? I completely agree with the question being posed as such. I don't understand it. I think he was asked about it in Delray Beach. I think I saw this on Amy Lundy's X account. And Taylor said that the nature of the knee injury is something that doesn't get better with rest. Okay? I'll take his word for it. But the schedule, as far as mandatory tournaments are concerned and high, 1,000 level tournaments are concerned, the schedule is relentless starting in March. And you really don't get any sort of extended opportunity for rest until after Wimbledon, when you get a couple of weeks. Last year, you barely even got that, and that's why you saw so many withdrawals out of Canada. This year, you get the 2 weeks after Wimbledon. To me, it's going to catch up with him at some point, and I don't think it has to. And I'll end on this. Taylor Fritz has made some remarks talking about Gasquet and Wawrinka, and he said things like, oh, there's just no way that I can play when I'm 38. Like, there's no way I'll still be playing. And my response to that would be like, well, yeah, not when you approach it like this, but if you managed yourself a little bit more, then why not? But to me, at some point, there's going to be consequences for Fritz's choices here. He's his own person. Obviously, he gets to do whatever he wants, but I don't get it from my perch, from my vantage point. Okay. Now, we go to All About Tennis. Hey, Gill, Mensik versus Sinner. Quick breakdown. We'll get into some Sinner stuff and some Mensik stuff because there's a little bit more where this comment came from. But that's the big upset of the week. Mensik over Sinner in the quarters. Did it in 3 sets. It was an incredible serving day for Jakub Mensik. Let's start there. Did he blitz through the match with a bunch of unreturned serves and aces? No. Sinner's too good a returner. That's never going to happen. Never. But what he did do was he served a very high percentage. He hit his spots, and he generated a ton of short returns, a wealth of short returns. And that's just about as good as you can possibly do against Jannik Sinner. You're not really going to just get a bunch of free points. He's too good a returner. But if you look at the analytics, and I did put this out on Twitter, and we're going back to depth, which is something, of course, I already discussed earlier with Fils and Alcaraz. I'm going to give you the number of Sinner returns that landed inside the service box. It was 54% of Sinner's returns landed inside the box. Tour average is 30% for Sinner. It's a bit better. It's 29%. So that's a huge uptick. And that's a product of Mensik serving. And then he met it with a lot of aggression off the ground and a lot of net rushing. And if we talk about the big serving counterpunchers, and we've seen Medvedev in his own unique style, but we've seen Medvedev do it. And we've seen Zverev do it. And before that, not really, right? It's kind of a new form of player. Hurkacz, without the movement of Medvedev and Zverev, he's done it a little bit. Well, how can Mensik do it better? That would be the question that I'm asking. And net rushing to me is a huge part of it because like Medvedev and Zverev and Hurkacz, remarkably, none of them have been able to bring a great forehand to the table. For some reason, that's a hole that all of them have had. And Mensik, throughout the week, was at least solid on his forehand, but honestly, against Sinner, it was pretty error-prone. Because against Sinner, he tried to do a little bit more with it. He was up in his ground stroke speeds off of both wings against Jannik because he felt that was necessary. Actually, he missed a lot of forehands in this match, did Mensik. But his ability to hit a big serve, grab a short return, and end up at the net right away was really, really good. And the one thing that he does, I think, better than all of them, although, Hurkacz actually volleys well, just doesn't get up there as well. He finishes at the net. Mensik was 20 for 28 up at the net. I was a little bit puzzled that Sinner wasn't able to find Mensik's forehand more. Mensik actually hit more backhands in this match than forehands. If you just look at total ground strokes, that was a shocker to me. And I thought a tactical failure by Sinner, and boy, is it rare that I can say this, because usually Jannik is all over this stuff, and I highlighted it all throughout his ATP Finals run, where I thought he was just, I was looking at the data after every match and just thinking, oh my God, he's executing the strategy aspect of this so brilliantly. But Sinner really wasn't hitting his backhand down the line in this match. His backhand directionals were basically his average, but actually slightly up going cross court. In my opinion, if you're playing Mensik, you've got to be down on average in going cross court. You've got to be up on taking it middle and down the line. You should be way up, because when you take, especially a backhand that doesn't, compared to the cross court forehand, it's going to stay a little bit lower, and Mensik doesn't like that. You've got to take your backhand line into Mensik's forehand. That's what you want to, that's the pattern that you want to find. And Sinner wasn't really finding it, and Mensik's backhand in the third set was the best ground stroke on the court. 75 mile per hour average on the backhand, which was equal to Sinner, and he made 86%. Jannik made 74%. Mensik didn't need to serve out the match in the third because he blasted back-to-back backhands down the line. One of them was off of a return to break serve at 5-3 and win the match. The other aspect of this is it was a really subpar forehand performance from Sinner. He was down 3 miles per hour on his average speed. He was down 4 percentage points in his consistency. First game of the third set, which ended up being the decisive break, was a bad forehand game. And it was a surprising moment because Sinner won the second set with relative comfort. And at the start of the third, you would have just thought this is still a Sinner win. Of course, with the serve quality of Mensik, as soon as he goes down a break, it's a completely different mindset for the rest of the match. And in this first game of the third set, Sinner makes a forehand attack error. He makes a neutral error in the net on a cross-court trade, just a bad miss. And then there was a point where he had some looks on the forehand to attack, didn't miss a forehand, but also just didn't really do enough damage. Forehand hurt him a lot. Mensik's movement looks great. I thought his return was really impressive. Mensik's return. He didn't necessarily have to be all the time the better player from the baseline because he was serving so well and returning so well. If you looked at he was winning the serve return dynamic against Sinner. Not an easy thing to do at all. But I think it's something that we can expect Mensik to do on a pretty regular basis. And that's part of what makes him so special. I mean, it's going to be the classic return games, lock down, make them really hard on your opponent. Returns in play, really good movement, really good, pretty good level of consistency. And then serve games, now we try to fly through them and play downhill tennis. Back to that sort of first ball approach and that quick fire mentality behind a gem of a first serve. It's just a very, very special serve. It's so rare that a serve gets the better of Sinner's return, but that's what happened in this match. So rare. Shanghai, Shelton did it, 2023. I mean, when else has somebody really sort of shut down Sinner's return? Although Sinner did have some breakpoint looks. Okay, let's do another comment about Mensik. It's from Arlov. Mensik is often talked about as a bit of a grinder, but with this win over Sinner where he redlined and hit hard and flat, is it plausible that Mensik's game fits the aggressive style more and will need to continue playing like this in future matchups with Alcaraz to be competitive? Also, how much does this win over Sinner change Mensik's relative ranking among the young players of Fonseca and Tien? Especially, he's now the only of the three to beat a member of Alcaraz or win a 1,000. Yeah, that's a good point. I suppose the peaks of Mensik have been the highest peaks in that trio. In terms of his style being aggressive, no, I don't think so. nothing I saw here changed my mind about who Mensik is, particularly because, as I mentioned, Mensik missed a lot of forehands in this match. He did. So if Mensik, look, if you would have told me Jakub's going to beat Sinner, I would say, if you told me before the match, Jakub's going to beat Sinner, I would say, well, he probably just had an uncharacteristically good forehand performance. And when he does that, now there's kind of nowhere to go, and he's a total beast, like an all-around beast of a player. That's not really what happened. He had a typically, I guess, hot and cold forehand performance. He did maintain an aggressive mentality on it, and he did hit some really good ones because he was going after the ball, but he missed a lot. So in that sense, he didn't really change my mind about what he is or who he is as a player, if that makes sense. But the aggression I want to see from him is net rushing aggression, backhand down the line aggression. The pace on the backhand was the most I've ever seen. I've never seen him hit the backhand that big, but his ball control is phenomenal off of his two-hander, always has been. So maybe there's room for him to, I mean, as he gets stronger, I think that shot's gonna little by little just get bigger. But how much does this win change his relative ranking? I mean, look, you know me, I mean, I've had him ranked high and he's still high. It doesn't change that much for me. It's one match. So I know that can be boring podcasting. I'd love to be like, my view of Mensik has totally changed. Amazing win, great performance, like big time. But no, my view hasn't entirely really changed of Mensik. My view is already that he can be, this is my view of Mensik, he can be a future winner of slams. He can be a future number one player in the world. That's if everything goes right in his development. At worst, he will be a top 8 player for 3 or 4 years on tour. That's like the worst case scenario for me, in my opinion, because there's a floor that's going to be provided already quite clearly by the level of his serve, and in combination with like his ability to hang in rallies from a movement standpoint. Plus, I like the backhand. I like the return. I like the volleys, you know? There's a lot there. From member video listener, I think we'll circle back to Sinner. There are some comments on him. Gear question, since you had Tennis Nerd on, with so many pros switching to Babolat, even secretly, do you think there's a clear technological advantage that the tour is just catching up to? Are we going to just see pure arrows 10 years from now or equivalent? Oh no, that'll never happen, because the other brands are going to develop pure arrow-like options if that's what is going to be required. I mean, that's what Wilson is seemingly doing, you know, creating kind of an aerodynamic, you know, power frame, easy access to spin. So no one racket brand is ever going to dominate, because the other developers and engineers, designers, whatever, they're not just going to get blown out of the water by one manufacturer. Never say never, but that just seems unlikely. I think what's happened here is Babolat developed the Pure Arrow a long, long time ago. It just so happens, and I'm not going to give Babolat so much credit as if to act like they, you know, knew that this was going to happen, but it just so happens that the trend in tennis of, I want more power, I want, you know, big spin and big power, and that's what matters to me, that is in line with the racket that Babolat had already developed and mastered a decade ago, more than a decade ago. So it's almost like Babolat lucked out a little bit. Not that it's all luck. I mean, they developed a great racket in the Pure Arrow, but the game moved towards the racket in a way. From Grant, Do you think the spate of withdrawals and retirements in the WTA's Middle Eastern swing foreshadows at all what will happen when the proposed Saudi Masters 1000 is on the schedule? It's a good question, maybe to an extent, but if you make it the third week of February, the prize money is great. It's a 1-week format instead of the expanded 12, 13-day format. I expect that the participation would end up being really, really good. Might there be some skippage a la Canada Masters where you get sometimes Sinner, Alcaraz, that tier of player passing up, saying thanks but no thanks because I've just won the Australian Open and I'm just going to, I don't feel like it's a good idea in terms of managing my year. Yes, but I mean, look at Sinner and Alcaraz both playing Doha. I think that's a pretty good indication that it's not going to be impossible to get them to play a 1000 in Saudi Arabia. But remember, the ATP has also made it non-mandatory, so you won't get a 0-pointer on the rankings. For all these WTA players who pulled out, they will get a 0-pointer on the rankings, and they're still doing it. One distinction is that there's 2 WTA 1000s for the women. So they go Doha, Dubai back-to-back. They're both 1000s. That's an even tougher situation. Plus, the number of 500s on the WTA calendar is just insane. It's literally every week there's a 500 or a 1000 for the first 4 months of the season. A related question from TNS Guy. With the recent news that Pegula will be leading a players' council for calendar reform, I am curious about the opinions of lower-ranked players. Top men and women have been advocating for changes because they usually advance far in tournaments. But for the players who lose early, wouldn't they want a longer season so that they have more opportunities to play, or at the very least more tournaments per week so they can have better chances of playing in main draws? It's interesting about the Pegula thing with the calendar reform council. I'm curious to see what they come up with because, again, kudos to them for taking the initiative and basically putting together a body who will then come forward with a proposed solution to the problem. That's certainly good news and positive steps forward. But this remains a very difficult problem to solve. So if you're celebrating calendar reform, you are doing so entirely prematurely. There are still some major roadblocks and, frankly, some difficult things that the players are going to have to reckon with. Specifically, and I've talked about this many times, trade-offs. Trade-offs between more events, a tougher calendar, and prize money. More prize money versus less. Because these things are coupled and related no matter what. And I know that there are ways in which players can perhaps get more revenue per event, or they can get a larger share of the revenue. But this remains the same. It remains the case that more product is going to be more money to go around, and less product is going to be less money to go around. That will always be true, and the NBA is going to be reckoning with the same thing because everybody agrees that the NBA season, 82 games, it's too long, and there's talks all around the league now of, are they going to be willing to fix the problem with the league, that the season is too long? Are they going to be willing to fix that by taking away 10 games or whatever, however many games? I mean, this is a universal truth. This is not just tennis. So tough decisions. Tough decisions are ahead. That is kind of my point. The lower ranked players complain about the length of the season as well. Plus, you don't have to go that far down the rankings until you hit a class of players whose expenses are somewhat similar to their earnings. And if that's the case, longer seasons don't help, right? You can break even for 6 months, break even for 10 months, and you're still breaking even. So the dollar total at the end of the year might look more impressive if you play for 10 or 11 months, but your expenses are also, they continue as well. Not to say there isn't a chasm between the higher ranked players and the lower ranked players when it comes to calendar reform. It may exist, but I would just point out, I would make it clear that if you do talk to lower ranked players even challenger level players, they are also going to tell you that the 10-month season is a freaking difficult thing to deal with, and that the off season isn't long enough. It's not just the top of the game saying that. Next one is from member Orchid Blue. Hey Gil, love the videos. Jannik admitted to being in a little downturn in his post-match interview after his loss to Mensik. What do you think are the primary reasons for the dip in form, and how concerning are his most recent losses? I know you caution against reading too much into February results. His mentality seems to be a point of interest. The Mensik match was another where he won more total points overall, but didn't win the match and didn't capitalize on his break points. This phenomenon hasn't been isolated to February. At the same time, variation in his game is taking some time to integrate, and he wasn't very clean off the ground, especially on the forehand either against Jakub. What are your thoughts? There's a lot to respond to here, but thanks for mentioning the February thing. Can I just go through something quickly with you guys? Let's go through the February takeaways from last year. Here are the February takeaways 2025. The new racket fixed Tsitsipas. That was totally false. Top 10 Felix is back. That was half true, half false, because the next 4 months, it didn't happen, but then by the end, it was actually true. Rublev has fixed his mental health and will have a more consistent year. That was very false. Acapulco, Tomas Mahach is ready to surge. That was false. Denis Shapovalov could re-enter the top 20 conversation. That was false. The only thing that really carried over and had some sticking power when it comes to February's storylines last year was that, Draper's run of the final in Doha kind of set the foundation for his Indian Wells title run. The best counter would be maybe crossing over to the WTA side, because Anisimova, her first taste of sort of elite tennis was last February, and that was a very, very real preview of what was to come for the remainder of the year. Anisimova, Wimbledon finalist, US Open finalist, you know the deal. So in that case, sure, but it's a freaking mess if you look back, and I find that that's the case quite often. So that's kind of the February thing. But for Sinner, here's how I look at it. For more than 2 years now, the panic meter really hasn't gone up over a 1 out of 10. The alarm meter, a 1, maybe a 1.5. There hasn't been any moments in the last 2 years plus where Jannik has shown any real vulnerability against anybody but Alcaraz. Maybe one tournament here, one tournament there where he takes a loss, but this is probably the worst back-to-back losses he's taken. Actually, definitely the worst back-to-back losses he's taken since 2024, when he lost that Wimbledon quarterfinal against Medvedev, and then he lost in Canada to Andrei Rublev. But there was physical stuff going on there, so you could make an argument that in both of those cases there were some physical stuff. Canada, he was coming off of illness. Wimbledon, he was ill that day against Medvedev. He doesn't really have that to go off of in terms of the Djokovic loss and this Mensik loss. Physically, he was fine in both. So you might have to go back even further. Fact is, he hasn't taken a truly bad loss, and this wouldn't qualify as one because Mensik is a beast. He hasn't taken a really bad loss since the Altmaier defeat in 2023 at Roland Garros. So the alarm meter, it's been at a 1 out of 10 for an unrealistically long period of time. Now it's probably it's a 3 out of 10 at the moment. 3 out of 10. It feels like a lot because we haven't moved off of a 1 out of 10 or a 0 out of 10 for such a long time. That's the way I would look at it. He has lost a little bit of confidence. I think mentally the composure is not exactly where you would want it. The breakpoint clutchness has been an issue. There's some uncertainty, I think, in terms of his convictions on the court, his identity a little bit, okay? Not a severe case of missing identity, but a little bit. And he's lost 2 matches, as you point out, where he hasn't won the big points. So he's pressing a bit. He's lost a bit of confidence. Honestly, it's about time. He just won 90% of matches in back-to-back years for the first time since mid-2000s Federer. It's about time. He has a bad couple of months. That even sounds hyperbolic. So I'm going to leave it at that. From Lindsay, another junior with 2 forehands and maybe a lefty and righty serve made the social media rounds this week. What's your latest thinking on prospects for players with 2 forehands at the pro level? I'll elaborate on this further at another point. I know we've gone pretty long here, but a lot of people are skeptical about the grip change that is required in order to hit a forehand off of both wings. And personally, while it's very challenging for us regular tennis players who keep a top hand and a bottom hand at all times, that's what we're used to, and that's what we do. What Teo Davidov does with the interlocking hands on the bottom of the racket and his ability to make a quick grip change either way, it looks really quick and really clean to me. So I am not a skeptic of this. I think this can work at the highest level. The problem is you need players to, if you only have like 3 high-level juniors trying, then the math becomes pretty bad about it working out. It's like a one-handed backhand. If you only have 10% or 5% of juniors even attempting to play with one-handed backhands, then the low percentage of players who would make it ordinarily anyway, like the pool is just smaller. You get what I'm saying. If you could make the worst possible player using only attributes from the current top 10 players, what attributes would you take? And what do you think this hypothetical player's career high would be? We've done this once before. We're looking at the top 10 and we're making the worst player possible. Forehand. Worst forehand, I'm going to go Bublik. Backhand, Felix Auger-Aliassime. Serve, Alex de Minaur, no doubt. Volleys. Who's got the worst volleys in the top 10? Oh, Fritz. Yeah, that's Taylor Fritz. Mental, that's a tough one. I think last time I went Zverev, and the argumentation could still stand for Zverev because he's still a little rough with nerves. But I'm going to go Bublik. Yeah, I wouldn't really want... yeah, I'm going to go Bublik's mental. Movement, sorry, it's also Bublik. You know, he's the world number 10, and he's going to show up a lot in this player. Okay, is there anything else? Have we hit on everything? Return? Maybe that's Shelton. It also might be Bublik again. Yeah, that's the player. Hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time.